Learn the most advanced recruiting techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
Startup pains, learning how to properly evaluate the people you are looking to hire. That's today's topic today, and we're going to discover how do you really discover who that person is and whether or not they're competent. My name is Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. Our mission is to discuss and deconstruct insights from top-performing entrepreneurs and industry experts. Every week, we uncover tested tactical solutions to solve your company's toughest hiring challenges. Today, our guest is Craig Cooke, the co-founder of and CEO of Rhythm, which is a full-service digital agency building marketing systems. There's my one mess up for the day.
It
Craig,
works.
I know, right? So Craig started this company with a small investment, has built it into an outstanding organization. He's made his team and him have made the Inc. 5000 list 5 years in a row. OC Business Journal past 5 years, top places to work for 4 years, and also just won a pretty big award, the 2017 Premier Award for American Honda, some of the work that they did.
Yes.
So he is a proven businessman. He's got major street credibility. So, Craig, I want to welcome you to the show today, and thanks for being a guest.
Thank you for that introduction. Very kind. Thank you.
Absolutely. So a few things I want to cover today. I want to go over your particular story and how you started, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the show. And, you know, one of the things we like to do is provide tools that they can use in avoiding some of the mistakes that probably you and I have as entrepreneurs when we didn't really have those resources. So your story on how you built it, some of the biggest challenges you had when you started hiring, and how your process evolved. And then, of course, we're going to talk about kind of a framework that works for you guys that maybe somebody else might be able to use.
Okay, great.
All right, perfect. So before we get started, anybody listening to the live video stream, yes, I do have a black eye. I'm not wearing makeup.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Craig got mad at me before the show, but hey, I'm in line now. So Craig, let's start by talking about how you started Rhythm and kind of the first hires that you made. Let's evolve out.
Sure. So started Rhythm way back in 1996. It was called rhythmnet.com at the time.
Okay.
A couple of friends and I, we started it as a means to market independent music. So it was more of a .com model at the time. Marketing where people could discover independent artists, read about them, listen to song samples, and buy their CDs online through a secure server way back in 1996.
Wow, you evolved a lot.
We did. Yeah, it was an idea before its time, and we bootstrapped it, just $1,300 a piece in a computer. And
one computer between...
Yes, between the three of us.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and then we added a couple, shortly thereafter. But that's how we started.
Okay.
And it was a tough go, for a couple of years. So we had to adapt and evolve. And as people started coming to us and for companies and saying, hey, this internet stuff, can you design our website? We said, sure, yeah, we can do that. And then a light bulb moment came off, and we started doing that, and then saw the vision for what we needed to become, what we are today. Now, back then, or actually, which I don't think I shared with you previously, but our very, very first help that we got brought into the office were actually a couple interns that we had met at a trade show, actually, that we were at exhibiting, and they liked what we were doing so much. So we said, yeah, come on over, and they worked for us for about 6 months. But then the first real production hires that we did were actually a couple students of mine, because I used to teach at two junior colleges, Chaffey College and Cerritos College, in the multimedia and design department. And essentially, over the course of a couple of years that I was teaching there, part-time, I ended up hiring, actually, there was 3, I forgot one of them when we were talking earlier. So there was 3 students that I'd hired.
So you were able to pick off the best ones.
That's right. And the nice thing about that was I just trained them. I was teaching the class as I would train someone to work for me. Essentially.
Got it.
So, kind of killing 2 birds with one stone, and that was my intention. I was just thinking, okay, things are getting busier, and need some help, so I'm just going to look for the best.
All right, so right there is a very creative hiring technique that maybe, hey, if you've got the opportunity to teach, take advantage of it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because you have them In my case, it was the format was about an hour lecture and then 2 hours of lab.
Okay.
So you had to just train,
Yeah.
as much as you wanted, exactly how you like to have things done. It was perfect.
See, I had never thought of that, but that's actually brilliant.
Thank you.
So I'm a little jealous. You put that in a book. All right. So you start going. You're bringing on clients. You're building out websites primarily. What were the challenges you ran into when you first started thinking, hey, we can build this into an actual company, like a really solid company?
So from a hiring perspective, definitely challenges as we needed to bring on more people. I remember back then with those two first hires I had mentioned, they had both left after a few years. They stayed with us probably about 3 or 4 years, actually.
Okay.
Good amount of time. And
That's
then,
great.
yeah, it was really, really good. Really good for them, good for us. But this one guy that we brought in right after that, I think he was referred to us from someone, and we just kind of said, okay, well, we just took it at face value, like this guy should be able to do the work, and we didn't really ask any questions, didn't really ask him to, just, come on in and you start, Monday or whatever.
Which is how most people hire, really.
I mean, you're right. Yeah, it's hard to think back to those days, but yeah, you're right.
So very true. Like, hey, do you have the skills I need? I'll hire you. Are you willing to work for me?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the that's kind of the number one mistake that most companies make.
Yeah, and he actually had worked for someone I knew that had a similar business. So I was like, okay, yeah, he should be able to do the work. So he came in, and he was okay, but there was definitely some shortfalls.
Sure.
And I remember one project in particular just blew up, and he just didn't have the capabilities that we needed.
Really?
So so that didn't last too long. So right there, we're like, okay, well, we gotta be more careful. So the very first thing we did was we started to come up with a series of questions to ask candidates during the interviewing process. And we also decided, let's make sure that we don't just do one interview. Let's make sure that they come back, more than once, just to see how they are from a discipline standpoint.
All right, so let's delve into that a little bit more. But let's talk about that aha moment when you actually, when you guys got together. So what was the discussion that you guys had? Was it just based off that one person that you hired, or was it based off of, or was it an evolution of maybe a few people that you hired?
Yeah, it's a good question. I just remember back then that one guy we brought on that I mentioned, we didn't do anything. It was just like, start. And then after that, it was a big deal. Like he really wasn't getting it done. And we were so upset about it, and so was the client. And we just thought, God, we got to just do something. We can't be in that situation again. So what can we do to increase our chances of success?
Got it.
And I think maybe we had reference, maybe we got a book or went online at the time, and I think we did a little bit of research and just talked about, well, let's get a questionnaire together.
Sure.
And that was our first starting point. And then the process evolved over time. But I remember the next person that came in that we decided to hire, there's 3 candidates, and we took them through the questionnaires, multiple interviews, and that person is actually still with us today, 14 years later.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So, wow, you guys got it right pretty quickly then.
Well, I would like to say so, but that's not the case, actually, because there was other instances that made us pause and evolve the process again, because we got burned a number of times.
Well, and what's interesting is in the beginning of a company too, there's a certain amount of luck that's involved in a way in getting the right people. And making sure that the right people are drawn to you. Yeah,
absolutely. There's a lot of things at play: timing, luck, whatever you kind of believe in, the universe bringing things to you. I believe everything happens for a reason, and there's certain people that come in, and hey, if it didn't work out, well, there's probably a lesson for both parties to learn from, and it is what it is. You just gotta accept it and move on. But there's definitely, if you don't change the way you're doing things and you don't learn and change, then you're just going to keep repeating those same mistakes and go nowhere. So those opportunities, when they don't work out, it's always a a good moment to take pause and say, okay, well, how can I do things different?
Yeah.
You know, to increase the likelihood of a better outcome next time.
Yeah. And I think the danger, like especially what you mentioned in the beginning, was, when you were hiring entirely for skills, that first person that blew up.
Yes.
Right? Did cultural match or
great question.
Or did any of those things even come into play? Was it just, hey, we have a need, we need this person, let's just hire them?
Yeah, great question. So, the one that we spoke of, it's just like we need this person, and he says he can do this, and it was like, yeah, that matches up with what we need. So start. So there wasn't really any evaluation, true evaluation. So when we made our first questionnaire, there was questions about work experience and skill set and so forth, all that. But there was more qualitative questions about the individual's personality and their makeup.
Yeah.
So, for example, an interesting one that we would always ask is, do you feel that you're a positive person? Because the reason why we asked that is because we just felt very strongly about having a positive mindset in order to achieve and overcome challenges and so forth. That's really, really important to us.
Which is a great interview question because, quite frankly, who would think to ask it? And it's probably something that every company wants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
unless
ones that are successful anyways, I would think.
Well, there are plenty of CEOs out there, like leaders, that aren't really positive people that are successful, but their culture is not around that, right? So
right. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the early days of when we were going to start defining our culture. We really had it at that time. But we knew that having a positive mindset was extremely important to us. And I was really surprised as we started asking that question, how many people were so honest and how many people would say, no, I'm not positive. I'd just be like, wow. I was just thinking to myself, well, thanks for your honesty, but interesting.
that would be what I call a knockout question, right? I mean, that's a core fundamental value of your company.
Absolutely.
And you kind of have to have some of those built into your interview process to make sure that you're getting to the right person.
Yes, I do not recall us hiring anyone that answered no to that question.
Really?
Yeah, it's a knockout question, yes. Yeah.
I mean, so I want to get more into that. I'm sure you have some other great, that's a fantastic question. So there's takeaway number one for you guys. So I'm going to dig into this a little bit deeper when we come back from the break. We're going to take a quick break. We're speaking to Craig Cooke, the co-founder and CEO of Rhythm. And when we come back, we're going to talk we're going to break this down a little bit more and give you guys some more good tidbits. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Higher Power with Rick Girard, giving you access to recruiting techniques that will help you hire key talent to build your company towards real success. Rick is a recruiting executive and entrepreneur who's been successfully recruiting in the aggressive Silicon Valley technology landscape for the past 2 decades. After a very successful stint at Apogee, he founded Stride Search in 2012. Based on a lean efficiency model, Stride has uniquely positioned itself as a leader in retained search for the most critical talent hires within a small organization. Whether you're a startup executive or recruiting professional, by listening to Higher Power with Rick Girard, you will walk away with skills to help you attract and hire great talent. Now back to Higher Power with Rick Girard.
And welcome back to the show. This is Higher Power Radio Show. I'm your host, Rick Girard, and today our guest is Craig Cooke, the co-founder and CEO of Rhythm. So he just dropped a really good interview question, which I hope you guys got, which was, are you a positive person? Which is a core value of their company. So, getting into core values, and you mentioned before the break that you were just starting to define your who you guys were as a company. Mm-hmm. So, what did you come up with as your core values? Positively is one, but what were the other kind of core values that you kind of built the company around?
So we believe in a positive and open environment, is what we call it. So with that meaning that there's an open environment facilitates communication. So really want to really reinforce the need for communication, and that it's respectful to we respect the opinions of others. Is we have a whole what we call our code. It's like an operating code, and it's set up in the form of kind of like positive affirmations in a sense. So I respect the opinions of others. I realize the importance of being on time and meeting deadlines.
Yeah.
It's really important for our industry. There's a lot of professionalism that is something that we really regard as important in our organization. So a positive and open environment that really facilitates communication, collaboration at a high level of professionalism. One of our other statements in our code is I'm a mature, experienced business professional.
Sure.
Yeah, so a lot of things. There's a lot of things in there, and it's hard for, say, one person to say, "Oh yeah, that's I buy into all of that, and it's all for me." But it's more whatever resonates. If there could be 3 things out of the myriad of language that we have in our brand expression book that they can latch onto and really hold to their own, like, "Oh yeah, that resonates with me."
Yeah.
That's awesome, And if there's another few that, "Oh yeah, that's cool. I like that too." It just helps. It just helps create that alignment, and it's something that we actually reinforce to staff on an ongoing basis.
Okay, cool. So going back to that kind of meeting where you guys started to figure out, what did you guys figure out what you were doing wrong in the interview process, and what did you figure out you were doing right?
Well, one thing that we figured out that we knew the questions were good questions.
Yeah.
And I'll just share another quick one too that was really telling. One that we would share is, how is your relationship with your coworkers? And then another follow-on was how is your relationship with your supervisor?
Sure.
And if they just started going off on a kind of a rant about, oh man, it was okay, but there's this one person who was a real jerk, and didn't get along with him, or oh yeah, my supervisor, he's just a jerk, stuff like that is, okay, well it's a pretty negative person, and maybe there's some validity there, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's this person with the issue, and you just kind of have to explore that and kind of see what you can get out of them. But it's a telling question, as opposed to someone that says, "Oh, relationship's great. I get along really well with all my coworkers, and oh yeah, my supervisor's awesome."
So you guys learned to kind of take an approach, really behavioral questions is kind of what you guys are.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's a lot more to having a good team member or a great team member than just skill set.
Oh,
for
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the attitude is really important.
I'm a big proponent that the skills can be taught if people are light. It's all about attitude and whether or not they're going to perform.
Yes, because it's much more difficult to change behaviors and attitudes. I believe it can be done, but it's extremely difficult, and it's rare that people do change them.
Yeah. Your first question kind of reminds me of a question that I teach or that I have people ask is, do you consider yourself lucky? It actually kind of shows the same thing as your first question, whether or not they feel like, hey, I've got the things in my life, and they show gratitude for what they have.
Right.
Or, and again, people will say, no, I'm not really a lucky person. And if they take it the angle where, like, every time I bet, I lose and that sort of thing, you can pretty much you pretty much bet that they're not a positive person.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's essentially the same question, just phrased in a different manner.
Yeah,
but it actually means the same thing.
Yeah.
You get the same meaning out of it.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So so then as your process has evolved, how do you guys run interviews at this point? Like, what's your kind of structure
yes. So one thing too we noticed, to get back to your earlier question, I don't think I've answered it fully, and then I'll answer that too.
Sure.
We realized there were some instances where, wow, we really thought this person was going to work out well, but what happened here?
Yeah.
And it's mostly in the realm of developers and some designers. And back then too, there was more of a crossover. It wasn't as distinct and separate. You have designers that code and coders that would design too.
Yeah.
But we started implementing tests to written tests, and then an actual test of
like coding test for the
coding
developers.
test, yes, and also design test for the designers.
Sure.
And the questions were a mix of just knowledge on various, say for developers, various technologies, and rate your familiarity, so like self-evaluation. But then there was questions that they had to answer and problems to solve on paper, and then they would get a design and say, okay, go create this, and we give them an hour and see how far they get, and that would tell, like, okay, well, did they get it done? Did they get it a quarter of the way done? and what's the quality, how do they approach it. So it'd really tell a lot.
Which really checks off the boxes on the skills piece, which is what you were hiring for before, right?
Absolutely, and there's so many people that say they can do this type of work, and they can. We've had some funny instances where someone was taking the test, and about 5 minutes into it, they just put down their pen and said, "You know what? I can't answer these," and got up and walked out the door.
I've had people that have done that too.
Yeah, I was like, okay, glad we dodged that bullet.
Yeah, totally. I found that. Now, do you give your tests on site when they come on for the interview, or do you administer them prior to them coming in for an interview?
On site, actually.
Okay. See, I think that's the best way to do it, because when you give it to somebody to do on their own time prior to them even meeting you, they tend to not do as well, because there's no emotional charge for them to do well.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. And normally we would do that when they come back for, say, a second interview. So the first interview, or just kind of going over their experience and just kind of seeing if there's a general fit. And then all the candidates that we felt were good, then we would bring them back and then have them take those tests.
Sure.
Because then it's more time intensive too, because you got spend more time, and they're taking up space doing their tests and so forth. So you want to narrow it down a bit.
So then you also put a process in place, which was first contact, set up an on-site interview, and then they come back for a second if they did well.
Yes, correct.
Perfect.
Yes.
It should never be like, hey, we want to hire you right away.
Yeah, no, it's
very
rarely.
In a way.
Yes, absolutely, because things can change from the first time they come in to the second time. And then what we also started doing and changing is getting additional people involved. It's interesting. I like to think that I have a good eye for the talent in people, but I'm definitely not perfect, and it's always nice to get some additional perspective into the mix.
So do you bring like 2 or 3 other people into the interview process?
Yes, and
interview panels work really well.
Yes, and that's how we really do it today, is where there's normally at least 2 to 3 people in the interviewing candidates.
Nice.
And it's normally the people that are going to end up working with that individual are doing the interview. So the first, it's changed over time as we've scaled and become bigger. I'm not involved in those early stages anymore, which is nice. But it's interesting, because there's some stuff that I did like about that, but time is
you can always interject yourself back in.
I can, but it's tough.
Or did they run you out?
There's just the timing. I mean, sometimes some of the ways we do it today, it's phone screening first, then they come in for an interview, then they come in for the bigger interview with more team members that they would be working with.
Got it. Now, do you meet everybody who gets hired too at some point?
During the interview process, just because of time constraints, we're about 40 people, so it just doesn't work out where I can meet every person before they come on board. I like to, but I have to put a lot of trust in the team, and that's been interesting, because there's been people like, wow, why did we hire that person? And there's interesting conversations.
You've also probably grown because you put the trust in the team. Absolutely,
you have to.
And you delegate, right?
Yes, as
Again,
much as possible.
This is something us entrepreneurs don't do very well, most of us.
What I like to tell my team about that with trust and delegation, back in the day when I was very small and doing all of these different hats, and before we hired the first people, it was like, if I never trusted anyone or delegated one, I'd just still be by myself doing all this work by myself, and we wouldn't be 40 people. So you have to delegate,
and you'd be limited in the scope of the work you could do, and it'd just be it's definitely a big burden for sure.
Absolutely. And you have to be okay with when some people make some mistakes too, because once they do, then they learn. I mean, that's how we've become what we've become today. We've just made a ton of mistakes over and over and over again.
Well, what is it? Fail fast, fail forward, right? I mean, that's really kind of the hot phrase these days. I saw a YouTube video or Facebook video the other day with Will Smith talking about it. Talking about fail fast, fail forward, and how he got to where he is in his career.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
So, so it sounds like you've done an amazing job of building out a strong team. Kudos to you.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Thanks.
So anything else you'd like to add a little bit as far as?
Yeah, I think another great moment too when we changed the process is, and it kind of got to that inflection point where my business partner and I, we just didn't have the time to be in all the interviews, and our department heads, they're strapped for time as well. And we said, you know what, we need someone that can really just focus on this, because in many businesses, but for definitely in our business, it's always a search for talent because technology is constantly changing.
Oh yeah.
And we have to have a freelance pool of talent, and we have to have our full-time staff we have to consider. So we decided to hire an HR manager. And
at what point did you guys do that in the company life cycle?
We did that probably about 4 years ago, I'd
Okay.
say, somewhere around there. So it's definitely much later on, since we've been in business now 22 years. So yeah, I guess it took us quite a while to get to that point. But yeah, I think about 4, maybe 5 years ago, and that really helped tremendously because, and in addition to all the HR issues that can come up, and that's handled, but just the recruiting process alone. The fact that one person is handling that, searching for the talent, doing the initial calls, coordinating the interviews with having the candidate come in with the team that's going to be interviewing and sitting in, evaluating everything. It's been, wonderful.
Do you wish you would have done that sooner?
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to remember the size that we were at the time when we brought him on board. We might have been around 30 at the time.
Okay.
When we brought him on board. If we would have brought him on board when we were like 20, 25, probably would have been a good thing. But better late than never. And but I think definitely for sure there would have been a time where that would have been too early of a hire for us.
Yeah. But I think it's important, even when you're small, to have somebody who runs that whole process. And it's not necessarily a good thing to have an admin. I mean, if you can find somebody to do it, fractional. Like there's all these companies that are popping up right now that are fractional CFOs, fractional HR,
right?
Fractional recruiting,
right?
So that's something I think a lot of companies can benefit from.
Absolutely, because that's the way you can scale into things.
Because otherwise, it's just another thing on your plate that you're doing.
Yes,
and you don't have the time to do it.
No, just don't. So, and then it's just that way things can become more systematic, and by just here's the process, and just ensure that this happens this way every time.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're just running and you don't have the time, you can tend to let me just skip this step. Let me just go right over to here, and it's just not good. It's better to have that system executing the same way every time.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking to Craig Cooke, the co-founder and CEO of Rhythm. Man, thank you for sharing that great interview question. I think if anybody pulls one thing out, are you a positive person, is probably one of the best interview questions you ask. Now, here's the thing. If you're a founder or a person who's asking these questions and you're not a positive person, maybe you should work on that.
I recommend it. It's a good thing to be positive.
I think so, too.
Yeah, life is easier. It's hard enough as it is, and how are you going to get through the day if you're just in a downward spiral of negativity? It's tough. It makes it tougher.
Being blissfully unaware is not a bad thing.
Right.
So we're just about out of time for today's show. Craig, thank you for your time investment in and welcome to the Higher Power Radio community.
Thank you, Rick. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sure there's some of our listeners, or maybe we got some big, companies that would want to hire you. How do they reach out to you? How do they find out more about you guys?
Oh, great. Thanks. So easiest way to do that is go to our website, rhythmagency.com, and that's RHYTHM, rhythmagency.com. Of course, you could Google us as well. And then on our website there, you can see what we do, our sample of our work, and there's a contact form and phone numbers, all that
just
good
a little
stuff.
plug. You guys have done some really cool work.
Oh, thank you.
I was on Beats by Dre. I love it. Like, mention a couple other ones?
Yes, Acura. We're doing a lot of work with Acura right now. We've been working with them for the past year and a half. And you mentioned earlier on the show how we received the Premier Partner Award. They only give that out to 15 companies a year, and they have over 1,000 suppliers.
Oh, wow.
So we're in like that top 1% or less than 1%.
Nice work.
Yeah, thank you. It's something they only give out to companies normally that have been working with them for at least 3 years, and they gave it out to us with just over a year.
Wow.
So big thing. They've never done that before. So
outstanding work, my friend.
yeah, thank you so much.
So I want to thank our listening audience for tuning in to this week's episode of Higher Power. A quick thanks to our team, our engineer Paul Roberts, our producers Andrea Ballin, Shanti Ryle, and our executive producer Kim Iverson. To listen to this show and any past episodes, you can check us out at Hire, that's H-I-R-E, powerradio.com, or Higher Power Radio on iTunes. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Higher Power Radio Show, or you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. That's at RickGerard1. We have another great show lined up for you guys next week. Our guest will be Randy Platt and Rodney Burris, both the co-founders of Care Partners at Home. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power with Rick Gerard on OC Talk Radio.